The African American Legends series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as sports, entertainment, literature, religion, and education. We'll explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Dr. Brenda Greene, who's the director of the Center for Black Literature and the organizer of the National Conference on Black Writers, and the well-known Herb Boyd from the Amsterdam News, and he writes about everything. How you doing, folks?
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We're back again.
Yes.
The National Black Writers Conference is still going on.
Yes.
Tell us about what you're going to do this year.
We're really excited. It's going to be very soon, March 29th through April 1st. The theme is the impact of popular culture, politics, and the natural environment on the literature of black writers. Have to add on to that migration. Migration is also a major theme of the conference. And we are honoring this year Ngugi wa Thiong'o with the W.E.B. Du Bois Award, Nikki Giovanni with the Gwendolyn Brooks Award, Ishmael Reed with the John Oliver Killens Lifetime Achievement Award, and Howard Dotson with the Ida B. Wells Institutional Leadership Award. And Medgar Evers is our conference chair. We have 4 days of programming, which include readings, roundtable discussions, panel discussions, talk shops. We open with a poetry cafe on Thursday night at the Brooklyn Public Library, which will be dedicated to the memory of a writer, a poet activist who we just lost, Luis Reyes Rivera. And we are featuring at that poetry cafe Tony Medina, Patricia Smith, and Araceli Gourmet. It's an opportunity for emerging writers and poets as well as more established poets to hear some readings that are related to their own personal stories and the conference theme. And then we have our official opening, which is on Friday night with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who will be speaking to our conference theme, more specifically to migration. Preceding that opening, we are going to have Herb Boyd. We'll hear more about that. We're excited to have as one of the highlights of our conference a roundtable discussion on the responses of reviewers, essayists, and cultural historians and critics to Manning Marable's book on Malcolm X. And then on Saturday, we have panels. We have our VIP reception and our awards program. We invite everyone to come out to our awards program. We invite everyone to come out to the opening. And on Sunday, we have talk shops. And the talk shops are on how to write fiction, poetry, drama, book reviews, book proposals. And just backtracking a little bit, another one of our highlights is the featured conversation with Tavis Smiley. That'll be on Saturday afternoon. We're doing films. We've added that dimension. We're doing a day of films around writers and activism. And everything is on our conference website, which is really, really comprehensive. It's www.nationalblackwritersconference.org. Or you can call our hotline, which is 718-270-4811.
Now, when people want to come, can they sign up for the whole conference, or can they come for this activity or that activity?
Yeah, as I said, we have a combination of events. We have pre-registration going on until, I believe, March 16th, pre-registration for the conference. You can register for 1 day, or you can register for all 4 days. And we're saying that these are actually donations. We have a special rate for students and faculty and senior citizens, which is a lower rate, and you can register per day. And you can register on site at the conference. So we encourage people, but I think by the time this show is on, you'll have to register on site.
Now, most of it is at Medgar Evers.
Right. We open on Thursday night at the Central Brooklyn Public Library with a poetry event. But then Thursday during the day, all of the events are at Medgar Evers College. We have a youth program, and that's when we also have readings on the works of Nikki Giovanni, Ishmael Reed, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and John Oliver Killens. We'll have a day of readings. People have presenting papers. And then we go to the Poetry Cafe, as I said, Thursday night. And then on Friday, we're back at the college with a day of films. During the day, a panel discussion on films and activism, followed by a reading with Hakeem Mahabouti and Teje Cole, followed by the roundtable discussion with Herb Boyd, Haki, and others, and then followed by the featured speaker, Ngugi. That's all at the college. On Saturday, we're at the college all day. And on Sunday, we're at the college all day.
Well, this is probably the largest conference of black writers in the country.
Yes, it is. It was the vision of John Oliver Killens, who was writer-in-residence at Medgar Evers College. And in 1986, we held the first National Black Writers Conference. This is the 11th National Black Writers Conference. And I like say Eugene Redmond says he believes, and I agree, it's the largest conference of black writers coming together to celebrate their work, to discuss the issues and themes and trends in the literature produced by black writers, and to look at what the future holds. So it's a gathering of students, of activists, of writers, of booksellers, of publishers, literary agents. And although it's a gathering of people focusing on the literature of black writers, we like to encourage everyone to come, because we want people to understand that the writing produced by black writers is very complex. It doesn't speak to a specific theme. It is something that everyone can look into. I met a man yesterday at a program who said, "Oh, when I read literature, I don't look at whether it's black or white." I said, "That's very interesting." And I have to say there are certain cultural experiences and collective experiences that as writers, everyone brings to their own crafting of a story or a text. But there also are common themes and things that are relevant to the human experience that crosses cultural boundaries and crosses geographical boundaries. So it speaks to all of us. You're just getting different perspectives on the
Well,
human
everybody
experience.
who writes from their own experience.
Exactly.
Because your experience is who you are.
Yes.
Now, in the case of Herb and the political piece, sometimes it's analytical and sometimes it's critical. Now, tell me how you're going to handle this business about the reinvention of Malcolm X through the Manning Marable book.
Well, that's a key word there, reinvention.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, the book is by any means necessary. Malcolm X, real, not reinvented. And these are critical conversations. Some 35 writers that Hakeem Mahabouti and Maulana Karinga and Ron Daniels and we're like 4 editors on this one. We had to put our heads together and to represent a consensus in terms of opinions and these reviews. I think it was like 100 reviews came out on Manning Marable's book.
Right.
Well, first of all, Manning Marable did a tremendous job getting this material together.
Yeah.
Now, I think some of the controversies about his interpretation of material,
Exactly.
and that's what writing is about.
That's
so
right.
how are you going to handle it?
I mean, as you know so well, everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. But some of the facts in there, we have to deal with the facts.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, as you suggest, Doc, what about the interpretation of Malcolm's life? And you're fooling with one of probably the most important black men, in our whole history. And people are very sensitive about that. Say, wait a minute, how are you going to present him? And the presentation that Manning, you talk about 600 pages now.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, it's kind of a tragic irony that, and similar to what happened with Malcolm X, he was never around even to defend or to enjoy, the fruits of his labor. Right. And Manning died 3 days before the book was released. So he's not here to really represent himself, but hey, we have to push on, whether he's here or not. He's left behind a tremendous legacy. I knew Manning back first met him in 1980, 83. And I knew right away he was a budding scholar, and he had a particular passion, for our culture and history. And all of his books, up until this one, was pretty much applauded.
Right.
I mean, just heralded in all kinds of ways, particularly how capitalism underdeveloped, Black America. Many people see that as perhaps his crowning achievement, although you do have some of his supporters and defenders who feel that, hey, this last book was his magnum opus. Well, we have 35 writers here, and the majority of them contest that particular kind of designation. And they have some very firm and strong things to say in a critical way about what he's done with Malcolm's
Now,
life.
at the conference, you're going to have a panel. Who's going to be on the panel?
Oh yeah, we'll have like some representatives from the book itself. Of course, Haki will be there, and he is a publisher too. This is Third World Press, and I'll be there along with. We're going to have Khalil Gibran Muhammad will be there, who is the news director.
Yes, he'll be moderating, and Regina Jennings,
and
Diana Turner, Michael Simonga, who's also a contributor to the book. So we're saying roundtable because, as opposed to panel, we just
big table.
Right? Yeah, big roundtable where people can, generate questions, and we really want to make sure we get audience
now, I was
feedback.
about to say, will the audience be able to ask questions rather than give speeches?
I think, and as I think about it, we may even want to have those questions on cards, right? Because I can imagine what's going to happen. We have a specified period of time, and so we will have the questions on cards, and people can ask questions so that we don't have people coming out. Because you know how people are very passionate about this, and there hasn't been really enough conversation, and I think in-depth conversation from informed perspectives. That's one of the things I like about the book, because you know that the people who are in this book have read the book.
Serious
reading, and I think that's really important. It's very disturbing when people get up and talk about something that they haven't read. It's just giving their opinion.
As we used to say, no investigation, no right to speak.
That's right. That's right.
And it's good that it's being read, and that's one of the things we're saying to anybody who's coming into this debate or dialogue or discussion, is that you have the responsibility, the obligation, in fact, to read this book. We're not saying that necessarily you should purchase it, but at least read it. Huh?
Right.
You read the book in some way or another and come to grips with what he has to say, and then voice your own concerns about it, because at the last and final thing on it is left to the readers out there, because all these interpretations and all these criticism and everything, it's like some people say, I saw Red Tails and it was a great film, and then people are motivated to do that, to go see the film, and other folks say, I didn't care that much for it. But I think you have the responsibility to go and see it yourself as much as you can, because we're talking about very vital aspects. Malcolm X, Red Tails are very vital parts of African American history.
Right, and I think that speaks to what we're trying to do with the conference too.
Yeah, what is the theme again?
Yeah, the theme is the impact of migration, popular culture, and the natural environment on the literature created by Black writers. So migration is something that we can all speak to. That migration, we have writers coming from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Europe. We're in all parts of the world. And we had, as a pre-conference program, Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote the book, The Warmth of Other Suns, which looked at the migration experience of African Americans. So you can look at migration from broad perspectives. And I think that the conference speaks to the fact that we don't have enough people who are telling the story from our perspective, and making that narrative about what constitutes American literature and what constitutes global literature more comprehensive, so that those stories are told. That's why Manning's book is very important. I learned so much reading Manning's Marable's book that I didn't know about Malcolm's earlier life, and the impact on Marcus Garvey, how Marcus Garvey impacted his family and his thought process. So that becomes a way of us telling our stories, of Black writers telling our stories. It becomes a way of expanding the literary canon. And so that when people are looking at the contributions of Blacks in literature, they don't look at just one or two writers. There are so many people writing, and there are so many voices that are not being heard. And there's so much serious literary fiction that is not being published because publishers don't believe that's what people want to purchase and read. So it goes back to the responsibility we have to read the books, but the responsibility we have to tell mainstream publishing companies and to tell others that we want to read other kinds of books.
Well, it's interesting, as you talked about, where Black literature is today. in the days of segregation, black literature in the main was speaking to black people. There were people like Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington were speaking to white people as well. But they were speaking to black people. Langston Hughes was speaking to black people.
Yes.
Right.
Now, because of the integration, and particularly the financial benefit that comes from being a star writer, some writers do not really speak to black people. They try to speak to the larger community, and some of them try to be spokesmen for black people. So then the question is, when you come to a conference like yours, where black writers come together, are they going to be able to challenge each other? Are they going to be able to question each other? How are you going to handle that?
Well, that's one of the exciting things about the conference is that, first of all, we tell all of the participating writers and scholars, do not come to this conference expecting to read a paper. We promote it as a public program where people speak to issues. It's not about people speaking about the books and celebrating the books they've written. It's speaking to the issues that are and the themes that are in those books. And we ask them to speak to those themes, but to also ensure that we have time to get audience feedback. We want to have a dialogue with the audience. So we reserve a minimum of 30 minutes at each session so that the audience can ask questions and so that there can be an exchange. And some of the themes, I spoke to the themes of the conference, but we have a panel discussion on what do we mean by urban literature, and how is popular culture shaping urban literature? Is there a place for urban literature, and how can we look at it in more critical ways? We look at the literature that's been created as a result of war, of the impact of natural disasters, things like Katrina. We explored the whole role that Katrina played in the literature, the poetry and stories that writers were creating. That was 4 years ago. Right now we have much more information on what has happened and how natural disasters affect the literature of people. How do politics affect the literature? One of the panels is focusing on the whole, has people have written about Obama and politics and how that has shaped the kind of literature that people are producing. Kelly Goff is on that panel. William Gianni Cobb is on that panel. Aubrey Hendricks is on that panel. We also have a panel that looks at migration from a more global perspective. We have Khadija Sissay, who's from England, on that panel. Jeffrey Renaud Allen, who's a faculty member here at CUNY, is moderating that panel. Two writers, one from Nigeria and one from Ghana, are also on that panel looking at migration. So we're really looking at, as I said, a very in-depth
When you say looking at migration, you mean the impact of migration?
The impact of migration.
On our culture, on our behavior?
And on our lives. On our lives.
Are you doing, much of it going to be politics, the impact of migration on politics in Africa?
Well, I think we're looking at those three areas. So one panel is zeroing in on migration. Another panel will be zeroing in on politics and popular culture.
Okay.
Another panel will be zeroing in on the natural environment. Another panel will be zeroing in on what's happening in the publishing world and what's happening as a result of the internet and social media. How does that impact publishing? So we're taking those three areas as broad themes, and we have roundtables and panel discussions that speak to those three areas: the natural environment, migration, and popular culture in different ways. When you talk about popular culture, you can't leave out politics because politics is really shaping what ends up getting published and what's in the media.
In fact, politics, touch all of those.
It touches
everything.
Everything is political.
Sure, everything is political.
Everything is
personal becomes political.
That's right.
Yes, indeed.
Exactly. So you don't even have to say politics when you're discussing literature.
Well, I was referring to more or less organized politics. For example, Adam Clayton Powell came into the Congress in the 40s, and he was only the second black congressman in the 20th century. Now we have 43,
Right.
44, and an African American president. I'm sure somebody's writing about the impact of this on the condition of black folks in America. I know you write about it every
All
day
the
in the
time.
newspaper, but that's more political reporting. What about interpretive politics?
Well, I think
When
the major...
when Tavis Smiley comes in, maybe an opportunity to really explore that kind of thing.
Right,
you
I'm
know?
sure that he will explore that, and but also I just think it'll come up in the conversation in that panel on politics, because one of the books that Michael Samanga and Lita Hooper, who are on that panel, is, I think it's called 44 on Obama, which is really speaking to the impact that his election has had on the writing that people are producing.
He's the 44th president, and you got 44 writers responding.
Responding to that. I think Sonia Sanchez wrote
Yes,
on.
that's Haki. That's a
That's
third
again
world press book
third
too.
world press book. And then William Jelani Cobb's book also deals specifically
Exactly.
with politics. I haven't read the book yet, but I know that he is dealing specifically with politics in the age of Obama.
Yes.
Now we don't have it this year, but Major Owens came out with a book that it was a critique on the Black Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus. I don't know, and that really spoke to what has happened, how the Congressional Black Caucus has formed and developed in relation to certain personalities and certain issues, and he critiques it. And he also states what should be done. So I think that
He does it poetically too.
yes, he does. I think that it's going to come out in the conversations, and that's why it's really important that we don't have people just reading and giving papers. That we have conversations.
Are you going to produce a report at the end of the conference?
Well, we always have a report. We tape the entire conference for our archives. And we also bring in someone who can videotape certain sessions, so people will be able actually to purchase sessions, individual sessions of the conference. And of course, I have to do a major report because we have major funders, the National Endowment for the
Who
Arts.
are your funders?
The National Endowment for the Arts. We have New York Historical Society, the Gladys Kriebel Foundation, Con Edison, Barnes & Nobles. New York Council on the Humanities gave us a planning grant. We have so many sponsors. We have individual sponsors. We have sponsorships by some of the publishing companies who've brought out ads, Hachette Books, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins. So it really, really takes bringing all of this support in the forms of advertisement, in the forms of direct money, and the forms of in-kind support. The college is providing the the funding for our VIP reception. We just have really a large amount of support and a large number of people who are actually working to make sure this conference is a success.
Now, what about your students at Medgar Evers and the CUNY? How are they involved?
Oh, very much involved. First of all, we've encouraged our faculty to assign the books of the writers in their courses, and hopefully they've done that. Our students at Medgar Evers College attend the conference free of charge. Within CUNY, there's a reduced rate. CUNY is doing major email blasts to the whole CUNY population, helping to support the conference. Coming to African American Legends is, of course, helping to support the conference. One of our major programs sponsored through the Center for Black Literature is called Reinventing Our Lives Through Literature. And we are using some of the funding from there to bring students to the conference, students with our partner schools. We have about 350 high school students we're working with, and about 100 elementary school students. But we're going to fill the auditorium up on Thursday with young people, programs targeted towards them.
Well, you might want to have a contest at the end of it with the high school students writing essays about what they learned and how they interact.
Well, then hopefully we can have the teachers to encourage that, and we also encouraging our students who are coming in to have read some of the work of the writers who will be presenting at the conference. But the essay is a very good idea. And many of our students, for our Poetry Cafe, we have a section of the Poetry Cafe that is dedicated towards students. And so we had auditions from college, mostly college students. Some people came from as far away as Boston to audition for this Poetry Cafe. And so the Poetry Cafe will have 3 featured writers, and we'll have the emerging writers who are going to have a chance to read their poetry. And that's the one I said we're dedicating to Luis Reyes Rivera.
Yeah, because Luis was one of the great poets,
Yes.
aggressive and expressive wherever he was.
Right. And then also, I almost forgot to say, within Medgar Evers College, we have a writing contest. And we will be giving out a writing contest. Students are asked to submit poetry, memoirs, and
we have Herb
page-
Boyd as the
right.
judge.
I'll be there to help
Today-
evaluate that.
Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Dr. Brenda Greene, the director of the Black Writers Center at Medgar Evers College, and National Black Writers Conference director, and Herb Boyd from the Amsterdam News, and editor, writer, and good friend. Thanks for being with us, and good luck with the conference.
Thank you so much for
Very
having
good.
us.
Very good.
Thank you so much.